Olá, Luiz. É um prazer tê-la conosco aqui hoje. Nós estamos com a professora Louise Holt, da Universidade de Loughborough, na Inglaterra. Louise veio discutir conosco no evento sobre a importância da amizade no estudo da infância. A gente queria te ouvir um pouquinho mais para que as pessoas que não estiveram aqui conosco hoje possam conhecer um pouco das suas discussões, do seu trabalho sobre a questão da amizade, e dizer que é um prazer poder tê-la conosco aqui na Unicamp. A gente tem usado muito os seus textos como referência no nosso grupo de pesquisa. A gente está também hoje com a Thalia Silva, que é estudante de graduação e está nos ajudando a traduzir um dos seus textos para poder facilitar a leitura do pessoal. E a Thalia também tem uma pergunta para te fazer.
Obrigada, professora, pelo texto, pelas contribuições aqui na conferência. E eu queria perguntar de onde veio a ideia de trabalhar a Judith Butler em diálogo com os bebês.
Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here. Hola. Well, the idea came from two sources, really. I'd been a children's geographer for many years when I had my own first child. And when she was a baby, I was really struck by the absence of babies in children's geographies. So it was very fascinating to me to think about why we hadn't really talked about babies as subjects in children's geographies. At the same time, I'd been interested also in Judith Butler for a long time. And in particular, there was a book that she had published in 2004 called Undoing Gender. And in that book, Judith Butler says that to understand the operations of power and to challenge the operations of power, we really need to understand the context of emergence. So because the situations that we are in when we are in our earlier stages of infancy are in fact very powerful, and they become incorporated into our internal selves or our psyches. So Judith Butler argues that to really understand how we can transform inequalities around, although these are my words rather than hers, but inequalities around things like gender, sex, race, ethnicity, sexuality, that we really need to understand how ideas about those axes of power relations, which is Judith Butler's term, are reproduced in social settings from children's youngest age, because then they become kind of embodied as part of their subjectivities, and they can feel quite natural actually, and then it's very difficult to transform. So some of our most they feel like they're natural reactions to things, but they are in fact social. And so Judith Butler, as well as myself, is interested in how we can do these kinds of identities in other ways. And to do these identities in other ways, we really need to understand maybe how there are different families acting in other ways. But also geography is really important to that, because we have all these normative ideas about how children will grow and develop, and actually they come from very particular perspectives. They tend to be from very class perspectives, so middle class or affluent people. They tend to be from particular racial perspectives, so certainly not from the perspectives of minority groups and so on, and also more often from the global north and the global south, when actually families do things very differently, and then how children develop in those contexts can be very different. So it's really important to understand how many of the ways that we measure our children as developing normally are actually very socially and spatially situated, but then taken as a kind of universal to measure other children by. So for me, I thought it was really interesting and important to look at the really earlier stages of children's development and how they are socially and spatially constituted, can be quite different in different places, and to challenge some of these normative expectations that we have about development, but also to understand how our ideas about gender, class, ethnicity, race and so on are formed, from the earliest stages in ways that can feel natural to us, so that they are difficult, although not impossible to challenge. Oh, and the question about friendship. Okay, so the issue about friendship, so more probably with older children, so that's something that we talked a little bit about. But so my thesis really in relation to friendship is that we accord children so much power to transform society. So any kind of difference that we want to challenge, we think, let's put children together. So we want to challenge racial differences. Let's co-locate children from different racial groups in schools together. And we hear a lot of political discourse about how co-locating children, putting children together, they will be friends together, and they will then challenge the divisions in society through their own friendship friendships and social groups. And I've argued that this is a very powerful idea. It has a lot of political influence, gives us the idea that children are the future of society, which is an extremely powerful idea and discourse in many societies. It's true in the UK, and I think it's true in Brazil and across the globe as well. And from my perspective, that gives children a lot of power in many ways, but it also ignores the realities of their own agencies. Because as we probably know, if we know any children are agents. They have their own ideas about who they will and will not be friends with. They don't just play with everybody in the playground or everybody in their classroom. And children's own social and young people's own social relationships are extremely powerful in reproducing and continuing actually differences around race, ethnicity, class and poverty, gender, and my research in particular has focused on the issue of disability. But I do think this idea that co-locating children together is a very important one, but we need to understand the social, cultural and spatial context of those co-locations. We give children so much responsibility, and in some ways that seems slightly unfair to expect children to overcome all the deficiencies of the broader society, and yet we're ignoring the fact that they are actually constituted in broader society. They will have ideas and be influenced by the media, by their families, by teachers and by other things that go on. But despite all of that, in my research, I have found that putting children together can provide a space in which these differences can be played out differently. So unfortunately, in my research, many times, differences are played out in ways that reaffirm those differences. So class differences leading to stigmatization, poverty leading to exclusion. Young children with disabilities are often marginalised and excluded in ways that actually tie to and reproduce ways that they can be marginalised and excluded in formal elements of the school as well. But also in my research, we had times when these differences were transformed and played out in different ways. And it seems to me that bringing children together gives the potentials for that to happen. And if we don't bring children together, then there aren't the potentials for that to happen. So it's not always going to happen in every case, but there is this creative process whereby when we bring children together, we can have these moments of transforming difference and doing it differently that can give away an idea for how that could maybe be broadened out in other ways. So I gave an example of a little boy who used a wheelchair, and his wheelchair became the focus of a really creative game where the children are pushing his wheelchair and he's the carriage, and the children behind him are the horses. And so this symbol of, very often this symbol, the horses, the symbol of dependency often that is given in a wheelchair is transformed into this resource for play and for creative play. And it was Ali's idea, this game. Ali is a pseudonym. Ali's idea, and he was the instigator, he was the main protagonist in this game and transforming the idea of disability. And so to try to understand these processes, I have looked at the idea of encounter, which is a geographical concept whereby people come together and they can play things in different ways. But moving on from that, I've come up with the idea of geographies of immersion, which try to think about time as well as space, and that these creative moments of transformation are more likely to happen when children have a shared history and trajectory, as well as being in shared spaces for long periods of time. So there's an element of time as well as space. And one of the things that I closed on was a concern really that processes of segregation seem to be increasing. They're definitely increasing in the UK and in many countries across the globe in the interests of a kind of more neoliberal education system that we're focusing on trying to ensure the highest quality of education and the highest levels of outcome that maybe lead to different types of children being segregated again in different types of schools.
Thank you, Louise, very much. And I need to thank also to Geography Children's Journal, who is sponsoring some sessions in this conference, and the U is part of the team, so thank you everybody for us. Thank you. And also we have a little gift for you from colleagues from Faculty of Education. It's a book about public school in Brazil. It's hard times, but we think we can do very interesting things. Not impossible times.
Yeah, hard times, but it's not impossible.
Exactly. So thank you very much for being here with us. Thank you.